everybody, and welcome to today's episode of whatever it is that we're doing. We're talking. I've become a little bit more relaxed fit after the pandemic, honestly.
Yeah.
Right? It was great to do so many interviews before that, and we did so much during it that I got really comfortable with me and with you guys. And now I feel like we can relax and we can have a chat and we can have a friend over. So, Nicholas Polonakis, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Stormie. And I feel you about, the things that happened during the pandemic. It's almost kind of like we were in our own personal labs of experimentation and having to open up, and our normalness changed. And I think
Yeah.
because of that, we all found ourselves doing something different or getting back to like our essence. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
agree
feel
with
you.
that. 1000%. I mean, I think one of the things I really found out in that time is, first of all, just how much Venus is in my own personal chart and where that, like, the Venus vibration for me has really come up like full blast. And I'm like, look, I just want to be beautiful and say things and try and create some beauty around me. And I
Yeah.
feel that in everything I'm doing, from when I'm making breakfast in the morning to, spending time on the channel. So it's really, I don't know, where's Venus in your chart?
Well, that's interesting. You say that because I was just thinking how I'm Venus ruled. So I'm a Venus ruled person. And so whether at times in my life and my chart, I'm like, I don't want to be Venus ruled, or I've embraced it. I fully embraced it now because when you're Venus ruled, you cannot avoid it. It's in everything. It's just like what you said. When you get up, you're making some food. It's there. Your senses, your sense of
Mhm.
taste, what it does to oneself or in the household, just the kitchen, the aesthetically colors around you. If you think about it in a very simple way of just what your senses are doing constantly, and
Yeah.
then Venus is a major influence of your life, or like for me, Venus being Venus ruled, it's unavoidable. It's everything, really. Once I think someone accepts that, then you fall into the style and grace of it all, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a beautiful way to say that. The style and grace of Venus.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. Spencer Michaud actually is the one who taught me. I have Venus in Aries, and I'm also a Venus sun. I'm a Taurus. But it was Spencer who taught me that, like, I was using Venus in Aries to, like, go out and get things. Right. It's
Mm.
like I was like clonking people on their head and dragging them back to the love layer. And I'm like, you're going to love me. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
And it was really, he shifted my vision. He's like, Venus is an attracting in energy. You don't need to do anything but let Venus attract at the vibration of the sign that it's in. And that really changed it. So now, when I'm trying to attract, or I'm ready to attract and open something into it in a very receptive energy, it's very Aries. Right? Like, even my
Yes.
husband will talk about this. He's like, I can tell now when you are ready to receive something because it's really fast. It's very quick. It is like fire coming at you. And I'm like, yeah. And it's a very different experience for me.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're talking about here, because I think a lot of times, because of culture and society, like, oh, we're going to go out and get what we need. And that's part of what life is. But I think when it comes to something you're talking about with Venus, a certain type of acceptance of what you attract in, because
Mhm.
a lot of us are taught to go pursue, and that's fine. But sometimes I think you're doing let something going to magnetize towards yourself. I
Mhm.
think that starts with one loving themselves first, right? And by
Mhm.
being present in one's true self and relating to their true self and accepting themselves and loving themselves, it is organically, naturally, things come towards you. And that is the attraction that is created when I think one is at home with their Venus and comes to terms with their Venus and understands. Even in your case, like you're saying, a fire sign where like Aries, or all fire signs, where there is a moving out towards, but
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily, it's not so binary. It works in a different way. And I think, in a sense, even a fire sign like Aries could and learns about style and grace, and in their own Aries way, right? And then
Mhm.
and then let that come to them. It still doesn't push down the fire and the
Oh,
passion.
no.
right?
No, it absolutely does not, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
I think about we'll talk about what Venus actually is in the chart so you guys can look and you can see, okay, well, where is my Venus and what is this planet about in the first place? But I think about in one lens, I teach Venus as kind of your peacock energy, right? Like especially for in the feminine chart, it's like you're looking over here and this is what you're peacocking out and you're like, hey, this is what I got going on over here. Attract and come to me,
Yeah.
And in Aries, I mean, most people know I am regularly in cheetah print or some bold color somewhere on this planet or on the internet, So it's
Yeah.
very clear where to deliver the goods.
Yeah.
Just here to the red pants, I'll take it, And so it's
Yeah.
a cool way to learn to work with that. But when you're talking about Venus and you're teaching about Venus, how do you explain Venus in the chart?
Well, I usually with clients in different situations I'm talking about it, I like to remind people like what I talked about earlier about engaging with the five senses that we all have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a natural, obviously natural organic way to connect to Venus and to explore Venus, even if we know where Venus is in one's chart, right? And we study things and we learn and stuff. I think for one's own self-discovery or reclaiming of oneself, that moving through sensory processes. So, like a lot of times I'll work with clients and my clients like a lot of homework, and I don't mind giving them homework. I'm good at it, but it'll be so simple. It's like, hey, what is around you when you're hearing things around your household and your environment? Especially, let's say, when it comes to like, there's a situation in one's life where in a relationship they feel like they're not being heard or they're not hearing things aren't connecting and relating. And so, for instance, it would take something like with hearing, like what are you hearing around you? Do you hear the crows outside? Do you hear the wind blow? What kind of music are you listening to? Or is it silent? Those types of things. I like to work with people in that base core way. So then they find their own, I can obviously help and mirror and do Venus with them and mirror and relate with them to help them on their way with their Venus. But usually through the senses, one can start from a base core place and find how they relate to their environments, to the world. And really, it's all about how they relate to themselves. So that's how I start with Venus, at least with my client base, is to keep it real simple,
Yeah.
and so, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to, I feel like honestly, with any of the planets, when we really pick them apart and we even move, through the ancient texts all the way to modern texts, there's so many, it's like a kaleidoscope, really, when you open these planets up, I think,
Yes.
so it's very dynamic. But in some basic ways too, I go for the simple ones, the keywords, it's love, romance, value, self-worth, a lot of what you've talked about, harmony, diplomacy, these kinds of things, which is great because then when we move that out of the just the personal chart work and into some of the mundane concepts and look at how this applies to countries, communities, and stuff like
Mhm.
that, it's easy to guide with that, as well.
Yes, totally. Yeah, when we get into the more complicated, intricate matters of mundane activities, we see, like something like Venus, how it manifests. But for sure, again, I like to keep it simple too. Some of the, we're dealing with, charm and cooperation, attraction and sensuality and all those other Venus things. We can go on and on. That's the cool thing about Venus. When we talk about Venus, there's just plenty of words and adjectives and adverbs involved. So, yeah, yeah,
I know.
definitely.
I love it though that you did say charm.
Mhm.
Man, that's a thing. And you know what? For a time, I think that personally, I associated charm with something being negative or malicious or manipulative or something like
Yeah.
that. And it was actually Kathy Rose who taught me about the charm of Venus and that it's natural and it's normal, especially if it is in alignment with truth, you know? So looking at, again, my own chart being at 0 degrees of Aries, I'm keyed to a Venus frequency at the Aries point. She's like, you are charming whether you want to be or not,
Yeah.
but how do you use that? And I think that's a really cool thing to say, how am I using my Venus in any given situation? Or how am I using and integrating the Venus transit that is available for me right now?
Yeah, I like what you said, and where Kathy was coming from too with your zero Aries. You know, just thinking about the equinox and the new moon that that's happened there for you. I'm like, oh wow, it's can't help it. My astrologer's brain is going to start to
Yeah,
dissect your chart. But yeah, I think especially something like 0 degrees Aries, there's just such a rawness involved and such a powerful birthing energy there that you cannot you can't suppress it, you can't push it down. There's nothing you can do. It's pushing, the seed is pushing through the dirt into the world, you know, that life force. But as for charm, yeah, I could see how when you first started to talk about this, how there's sometimes we have these connotations that happen
mhm.
where because there are, I mean, there's people and situations out there, let's be real, that are manipulative, and
Absolutely.
they've come through the guise of charm
Yep.
and used for you know, not so good purposes, right?
Ah,
But
yeah.
yeah, and we have to be real about that, but it also gives more incentive to reclaim what charm is too. That in a sense, like you were saying, I used to be this for me, but then you like kind of turn it around and brought it back to what it really is and what it's inherently in everything, because love is everything. And then part of love and our way of moving through is to be charmed by love. And then we represent being charmed by love by charming others or charming situations or wanting to be charmed in general. As a human being, it's part of who we are, part of our DNA. And it actually, I'm thinking right now of charm.
I know. We got you stuck in charm.
Yeah, well, it's because I think there's a sense of mystery and charm too. Because
Sure.
if we knew everything about something being charming, it wouldn't give us the excitement. So there's this energy going by charm because you're kind of like elevated a little bit, or it's something's reflected back to you because your beauty or someone's charming with their beauty towards you, and but it feels good, but you don't know
Yeah.
everything about it, but you want to walk towards it. There's this mysterious something beauty to it all. And it's unseen too. So I'm all about charm. I'm a Venus and Gemini, so it's inherently in me
To
to
think
charm.
about beautiful charm.
Well, I know a little bit of, you know, a little bit about it. So, well, and it's the power of it, you know, the power of charm. Sometimes too, this isn't, I don't think that what I'm about to say is manipulative, but there's times where we see situations or people that we care about and so on and so forth. And we know we come to a room, you're looking at them like, I'm gonna throw a little bit of, I'm gonna throw a little bit of charm away in a good way, you know? It's like,
Hmm.
hey, how are you? It's like, you look, by the way, I like that color on you. You know, I like the way it's like there's something changes with you. And someone's like, really? Like, you know, and the energy changes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. 1,000%. Man, and I think about before we get into the transit, we really are going to discuss the transit, but I'm like having this vision as we're talking about it that Venus is never far from the sun, right? Like that's just not the path and how they travel, and how much that really ties into what you were saying about really like kind of owning that self and that self-worth and that self-value. Because you think about this planet of beauty and of charm and of refinement and of attraction never being far from the sun, the I am. It's like these really are very deeply connected to each other. So when something is happening with Venus, I think we have an immediate reflection back to how is my sun energy
mhm.
responding to this, and then we can tie in Mercury too, but let's stay here because if we get on
Yeah,
Mercury, this is like
yeah,
six
no,
podcasts.
yeah, no, but I fully agree because it doesn't stray. I think it's 43 to 48 degrees. I can't, as far
Yeah,
as it goes. So yeah, it's always tied into the sun. And as we're going to talk about here with this transit here, where there's a couple moments here that are technically, mathematically will show you how tied in it is to the sun. So
yeah, yeah. So let's talk about it since we are going to actually discuss a transit, and not just Venus, but I would encourage everybody out there, whether you are new to practicing or you've been doing this for a long time, spend some time right now. Be attracted to your own Venus. Put Venus at that ascendant for you for a minute and just spend some time with what does this feel like? What does this look like? What do I hear? Like Nicholas said, and just let it be. Get your fingers all pruny in the experience of Venus, especially because we're going to spend really from what? In terms of the Venus retrograde, it's really, we're talking from June until October of
yes,
this year with this Venus Leo. retrograde vibration. We've got a lot to look at over there. And Venus, because it is close, it is personal, I think we all feel it, right? As opposed to, you know, Pluto's going retrograde on the 1st of May, and it's like, cool.
Yeah, we got to remember the Pluto story, whatever it is always going to work in a deeper subconscious way, and will come out in conscious ways, but usually through personal planets, planets that are closer to the sun. I always think of the outer body planets as like we're on the stage at an opera, and the outer body planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are kind of pulling the strings. You don't see it. And then there's the other players of the opera, right? Like Venus and Mars and Moon, they're all on stage and they're playing it out, but those other planets are there. You just don't catch them. But yes, to your point, Venus is very tangible. It's right there for you to be integrated with and work with. So yeah. So it's June 5th of 2023 when Venus first enters the sign of Leo, summertime in the northern hemisphere. So and right off the bat that day and the next day, Venus does have a introduction and a relating situation, I will say, with Pluto, because as soon as we start this story, Pluto in Aquarius is on the other side of Venus, 180 degrees away. We call that an opposition. And they're like looking at each other. And we know Pluto doesn't just look at you, they peers into you.
Peers into your soul.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So so right off the bat, this transit is intense. There's and a lot of times I'm curious to see what you're going to say, Stormy, but you know, Pluto brings it's always a power struggle, I think, in the end, whether it's self-empowerment or a power struggle in between two parties, so on and so forth. There's something about power, reclaiming it and losing it. You know, is one way to look at Pluto. So right off the bat here, Pluto's like almost testing Venus and Leo, like, hey, you know, you're used to doing your Venus and Leo and showing, you know, your pride and your courageousness and dramatic situations of viewing love and relationships through this, I think, dramatic lens and intensity lens. And Pluto kind of always like right off the bat's like, hey, you know, how do you do this? And Pluto, I think, leads a story in the end that has to do with regeneration. So sometimes with transits, it's funny. You have a regenerative story that you claim at the end, right? Or
at the end, let's be clear, at the end, you claim it at the end, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But in Pluto, and sometimes Pluto comes in later in a story, I think. But right here is like the first chapter. It's right off the bat that Pluto is like, what are you doing with your power? What is it? How do you relate to yourself? What's happened in your relationships in general, especially if you have Venus and Leo? So that's the first 24 hours of the transit.
We just got here and it's already exciting, right?
Yeah, it could be hot, by the way.
Right. Well, I want to leave exciting.
Yes. Yeah.
An open and broad word for whatever that means for each of you.
Yeah.
Right. Because some of you are going to be like, Stormy, listen, I'm having like the best get down in my life. And I want that for you. And some people are going to be like, I am really, really challenged over here. So whatever it is, wherever your lesson base is at, is where you just get to have this experience and they're all right. There's nothing wrong with any of it. We all come out changed. Right. So
exactly. Totally. Yeah.
So my initial thought on that particular opposition does track back a little, that Venus has been such a star and such an influence energetically, especially since we've had, you know, the Taurus Scorpio axes lit up, you know, for this last bit of time. So we really have in sex and power and control and relationships and domination and all of those value things you were talking about. We've been around looking at that and needing to pull towards kind of a new value system in general. And then when we put that in global terms, in the global family, we are revaluing currency, we are revaluing time and work and all of these other things where you live, right? So I think about it in those terms as well. And as Jupiter and Pluto come into that square in May, to me, I feel like that's it. We enter into the new world. And that's it, right? Like just this old world energy is kind of gone. So as we do get to this opposition with Venus and Pluto, those questions of, is this an outdated way of being, I think are really what has been on the table. And we've done lots of valuation of how we value things, how we love ourselves, what we love. Like you said, the dramatics, right? I used to have this big opinion about this or this big
Yeah.
belief about this over here. And now I've kind of gotten slowed down and I'm like, well, hold on. My closest relationships in my life can't exist on that old belief structure
Mm-hmm.
anymore. So what does it mean to me now? Right? Because I don't think that every Venus retrograde is the symbol that if something's going on in your relationship, it's time to get a divorce. Sometimes
Right.
we have to divorce the values we used to have.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
and make some space for this really big change that is going to take us forward in this new world, in this new way of living and being. So that's my first thought when I think about that is like, whoa, now hold on, whatever presents itself to us under this opposition as being threatened, I think is really useful for us to kind of go towards and go, what is that? Because in any opposition, we're looking for the sweet spot in the middle of
Mhm.
integration, right? Or I can keep going my way and keep getting further and further and further from whatever the ideal or the change is. And then that opposition gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes.
So it's going to be interesting to see what pops up for people to be dealing with in terms of these valuation systems.
Yeah, I completely agree with you because in the end, if we're having a sky right now, Uranus is in Taurus, and Jupiter is going to go in Taurus in
Yeah.
May, and then we're talking about this Venus and Leo. We're Jupiter and Taurus, Uranus and Taurus, they're ruled by Venus. We go to look where Venus is, and in the fixed sign that you mentioned here, I agree that at its core, it's about the reevaluation of people's value systems, and
Mhm.
and whether it's what they value in relationships and what they value in resources, and in the mundane world level. It is, I think it's pretty obvious the shifts that are going on with the exchange of money and currency and the changing of that, whether we're dealing with more cryptocurrency and what is going to become of that or what
Yeah.
trade means. And remember when we trade things, we have something that we hold ourselves that we consider of value, and the other person across from us has doing the same thing, and then we're like somehow trying to find a way where that it seems like an equal exchange.
Right.
And in the past we found those ways of so-called equal exchange, but then they kind of like don't work anymore and they
Yeah.
kind of get out of control. They don't represent our values anymore because remember, I think too, as individuals, our value systems do change whether we are conscious of it or not. And so we have transits like this, like for the Venus and Leo and Pluto on the side, to put that on the table, like expose it, and be
Yeah.
like, what is a value to myself, or reevaluating that. And one has to sit with themselves, and then once they start to do that, they come to the table, right? And people do
Yeah.
this with each other. Countries do this with each other. Society does this with each other. So,
Yeah.
in complete, I love what you said, Stormy. I think it's the fundamental thing here is our connection to our value and what is of worth, and value systems, and just
Yeah.
so happens that Pluto is the one to to start off and expose it even more. But yeah, I think I think too, we started off this recording talking about like what happened with you during COVID, or what we found ourselves doing during COVID, because the normal changed, and we were kind of, I think a lot of people came to a place of what their priorities are, or their
Mm-hmm.
priority list changed,
Mm-hmm.
because the world was changing and was on lockdown, and everyone's had a story with this. And
Mm-hmm.
if you think about what priorities is, or if you had to rejumble them, and this top two things that I had used to be at the top, and then all of a sudden being in a certain new situation changed it all,
Right.
and then you're like, you have to sit and meditate with it. Oh, this means much to me. My
Right.
family means more to me than being a workaholic. My blah blah blah. Or I used to
Yeah.
be a creative person, and I got caught up in my work, and I was stuck during COVID, and I learned how to bake bread. You know what? It made me really happy.
Yeah.
It made me really happy. So that went up on the top of the list. So this is actually a story that's been going on and building for a while with some of those things you've talked about with Uranus being in Taurus, and then here we are, Pluto coming into Aquarius, this fixed sign thing. And I think with Venus, it really plays out tangibly. It's like now a lot of things
Mhm.
you were working with behind the scenes, here it is now for you to like express out and put out and experiment with.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, but let's one more thing I want to say to this. Got fixed signs are the most stubborn in my mind.
The most stubborn.
So if we're talking about shifts and changes, there's many of us or who might have a bit more of the stubbornness involved to the changes,
Yes.
or let's say to a Pluto story coming into the world, and that's challenging, that's tough, and so for anyone listening, I see you and acknowledge you, that's the way you roll. But I'm going to encourage you, like some of the biggest changes I've ever seen with clients had to do with fixed energy,
Yeah.
releasing and letting go, and eventually moving with change. So
Absolutely. And I
yeah.
think, thank you. I want to mirror that too, because I have found too with my clients who have high fixed energy as well. Like once fixed energy is convinced for the need and the safety of change. So I would just like to offer an invitation that during this Venus and Leo season, these overpowering feelings, whether they be of joy, whether they be of challenge, whatever they're likely to be more overpowering than they are the rest of the year. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Especially during the
Mm-hmm.
retrograde. Try to be with them. Try to give us some perspective as to where it's coming from, because information is also going to come to you during this retrograde. We've got some other transits that are coming up that are going to be phenomenally informative
Yep.
as to how and why to surrender that stubbornness. Like, that's why we have like mutable planets that come next to just like pry the season out of that fixed energies cold dead hands. So
Yeah.
you're gonna get some help is my point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, yeah, totally. Yeah. I remember that. Like we always start off with the seasons with an initiating sign, cardinal, but props to my fixed sign people. It gets started by cardinal, and here comes the next a fixed sign to carry what
Yeah.
was started. And so also let's just show the other side of what fixed does. They get things done from point A to point B and keep the fire going.
Yeah.
And so that's the other part of it too, the balancing part of it. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's good news because whatever you build during the season is likely going to have long lasting results, which I
Yep.
think is really phenomenal. Nick, when we talk about this and we think about I've been struggling with addiction. I've been struggling with this. I've been struggling with some things that need long-term solution to them for people to be able to sustain in some kind of healthy way. You can make long-term
Yep.
change when you change under fixed energy. So, yay.
Yeah. Totally agree. Fundamental pillars and foundations are formed. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we get Venus coming in, runs right smackety do into Pluto, who is retrograde, by the way. So again, still a signature of you've already seen it. We've already been here. You kind of know this has been creeping up, which I love that. And then we get to what is it? The 19th. The 19th is my next date that I have. Do you have one before the 19th that you're tracking?
I will say that like so on the 5th it starts and then does the Pluto opposition, and then it's on the 8th where and I think that we should just throw this in there. We don't have to talk too long, but Venus does square the nodes. And the nodes of North Node being in Taurus, South Node being Scorpio, fixed. We're talking fixed story here, and remember, just to say too, is the end of 2021 when the eclipses started in Taurus and Scorpio. So just to throw that in there, there's a more of a fixed story there too going on with the nodes. So that happens on the 8th. So and then you were saying which date was you were getting
June 19th, we get Venus into pre-retrograde shadow time, which I like to follow the full cycle. I go pre to post. I know
Yes.
everybody gets all excited. They're like, oh, Mars is out of retrograde. I'm like, who cares? Like, I'm like, no, we need Mars to like unpack his suitcase. And I feel
Yeah.
the same way. about Venus, especially again, because it is a personal planet. So it's so close. This is going to drive close to home for all of us. Either way, though, so we get to the 19th and we see Venus move into this pre-retrograde shadow time. This is where I always cue people, start to pay attention. What's going on in this Leo area of your chart? What are the signatures of, I think I need to be talking about this? And at 12 degrees of Leo, particularly. You know, what starts to show up for you? Where are you feeling like your creativity maybe got like snuffed out, and you're trying to have that reclaiming, you know, coming back into your life? And one of the places I like to pattern track back is to go, okay, well, when's the last time we did this? So let's go back to 2014, 2015.
Yep.
What was happening in your life at that time? And it's the way that I like to describe it, looking all the way to the end of this particular retrograde, where we see that Venus and Chiron have a conversation, is that I think whatever the heartbreak is potentially that you went through in 2014, 2015, you get a healing of it by the time we leave this particular transit. And that's big news, because this is like a personal heartbreak in some way.
Yeah, I especially when you're dealing with what we call shadow, because you're saying, you're asking others to pay attention to what's going to happen this time, and the reason is because you're reviewing it again, even from the 2015, I think is what you said, the last time Venus was retrograde in Leo, and even in the summer when we start to move forward over the shadow period, these areas. When, just for people listening, Venus is going to stop, actually, then go retrograde, and then go back over the period of time in the starting point that you're mentioning. Yeah. And there is, you know, I feel you on the little bit of the heartbreak thing. It could actually be literal heartbreak. But if we think of, just if it isn't just the relationship with somebody, it's something within someone's own self. There is like a severing and a reality, a certain reality, and touch, a wound that has been, you know, that's exposed, and you know, the feelings that come up with something like that do feel like heartbreak, you know.
Because I want to agree with you here, because I don't think that it's just, you know, you lost the love of your life and maybe that will be the signature in the story, but you know, were you really prepared to take on this job that you had always wanted, and it was like the most creative expression of you, but someone in your family got sick and you did what was right, and you can be honored in that, but also there was that piece of you, right? This is why I love to pattern track back, because I feel like humans get the opportunity in our lifetime to go back and actually heal some of the wounds or some of the tears that we have as we're still in the same lifetime. And I feel like this offers that. You know, so it doesn't have to be just the heartbreak. It doesn't have to be something gory, but where's that little piece of your self-expression, or that little piece of your creativity that you left it there, and now, like this beautiful scavenger hunt, you get to go back and claim it again.
I'm fully agree. And I like to work with people, my clients, that way, where one feels, and they can, if they don't feel that they have their hands on the wheel driving the story, that they eventually can find themselves driving the car down the path they want eventually. But you know, it's almost, you have to learn and retake and reclaim and review and go back. And along that journey, you feel some things and they come up, and there is a thing, but there, as you know, I try to always look for the sparkle of gold, like we talk about, like later in life, like in the final end of a story, something that we learn, we elevate. You know, we elevate ourselves. We're growing. We've always got to remember, I take the philosophy that our birth chart is a launching pad. You're not stuck with things there, you know, and that's life. Life presents certain situations to you, and you learn. And sometimes you fall on your face 5 times in the same situation. It doesn't mean it's going to happen again. There's reasons. And can you find a way to keep yourself upright, and where you learn and you grow? So I fully feel that, Stormie, and the way to look at it, you know, and to use it. So
awesome. Okay, what's your next date? I want to take us into the retrograde, but what do you have after June 19th of?
Well, I was just looking, because we went ahead, actually, right, if we go before, I'm looking at the 11th of June. It's I have Venus square Jupiter, the first time this happens.
Okay.
Jupiter and Taurus, and Jupiter is newly into the sign of Taurus. That happens in May, you know, the month before, and so we're at the early degrees, and so there's the first. This is going to be the first of three Venus square Jupiter connections that happen, and the first one happens on the 11th. And actually, what we just talked about, Stormy, like the shadow thing, it's just right with it. It's
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
intertwined with that. So yeah, we could talk about that a little bit later, because if we're timelining this, August is something to talk about too. So, but that was the date I had there. And yeah, I guess we can get going. I saw a date.
Let's get into the retrograde.
Yeah, I also have here on the 29th of June is the first connection that Venus makes with Chiron and Aries, Chiron the wounded healer. And this is a trine aspect, because we have Venus in the fire sign of Leo, and it's connecting with Chiron in the fire sign of Aries, and so they're vibing, they're 120 degrees away from each other, and it's the first of three connections that they're going to have.
Yeah.
That's what I have here. So
And I that's important though, right? Because the trine offers this pocket of opportunity, but I have to go to the opportunity to like actualize that thing, because it's pretty easy. It's a soft aspect. So when we see that trine happen here, I think it's like exactly what we've been talking about, where it's like, hey, look back. Look back. You weren't this person last time, so you couldn't do it like this. Right. And then you really get the full knowing of that at the end of this transit. Like that gets me chills and gets me excited.
yeah, if anyone, this Chiron and Aries story has been so power packed, especially in the spring of this 2023, because of Jupiter and Aries going through and touching upon it. The 0 degrees new moon that we had in Aries, the other new moon in Aries we've had a month later here with the eclipse. Chiron's in the middle of this whole story. Mercury went through Aries in the springtime. So, and we've had air signs, like we had the transit of Mars in Gemini, and currently Venus in Gemini, helping Chiron and Aries move through this process of reclaiming one's wounded self and reintegrating it within themselves. But here with Venus and Leo, fire sign, I think here's where the expression comes through. There's a kind of a having to deal in the cave of tending to one's wounds. Now, we're not perfect. We still have some wounds and scars, but now Chiron and Aries, it gets that Venus and Leo come in and like completely like open up oneself, new self, through this process of healing, and express themselves through that area. And I'm a big believer. I don't wish pain and suffering on anybody.
Sure.
But the knowledge that comes through hard moments is just invaluable. And I also think it doesn't always have to be dark and foreboding. I think we can transform our wounds, transform our hurt into beauty, and into a creative form, and into creative forms, creative expression, Venus and Leo. And here's a story that's part of this retrograde. So let's just think, retrogrades sometimes get the thing of like, it's going to be horrible, everything's going to go backwards. But retrograde, there's just a huge time to redo, reclaim, and retake something back. And here's Venus and Leo connecting with Chiron on a deep wound level. And you're a fire sign, or you're Aries, Leo, you want this. You want this vessel to express through. So
it's super funny, because I think about it, in the vision that I hold in my head is that, Chiron and Aries and all of that work that we've done, like genuinely, we have given birth to these new identities, and like you said, kind of in the cave, you're healing yourself, you're coming to know this different version of yourself. And then Venus gets into Leo, and it's like, get out here. Like, what are you doing? Which is so good, because when Pluto entered into Aquarius, I believe that we gave birth to a whole new generation of astrologers, right? Some of them are over the age of 40, and some of them were just born. So it's this really interesting place too, where I'm like, oh, some of you thought you were accountants, but it turns out you're astrologers now, so you've been in the cave taking the classes and doing the little cute business class and being like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And Venus like comes through this retrograde and is like, yo, girl boss, boy boss, you're an astrologer. Get your ass out here. What are you doing? Like, come to the table. And I
Yeah,
love
they're
that.
leveling up in many ways. And I know on one of your other channels here, your business channel, I see what you're doing, Stormy. It's kind of connected to that because I've had so many clients, especially during COVID, where I had to ask a new question on my form. And the question was, how much do you know about astrology? Because I know, and I started to get people who just didn't know. It went past their big three
Yeah.
that they go, oh, I started to study, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, so they know a little bit more. And I think a lot of that, we get to this point of what you're talking about, and like the other channel and classes that you give, like the next leveling up, and a
Yeah.
lot of times in with astrology or a lot of other modalities, one is having their personal journey. It's because there is something that is challenging or challenging situations in their life, and they
Hmm.
found astrology and they made the connections and they made sense of
Yeah.
their lives. And a
Hmm.
lot of what they're making sense of is wounds and hurt. And
Hmm.
then the knowledge of going through there and having the insight with oneself. And then let's say they take it deeper, they're studying astrology at another level, like you're talking about. And then here they are. Here's an expression of it. Venus is connecting Chiron. One's showing themselves. Let's say they're not the accountant anymore on their IG profile. They're like, I'm a budding astrologer. They publicly say it.
Yes.
And not only that, they had a particular aspect that they're learning about in the astrology world that they feel that they are becoming the authority on, and that they're
Mm-hmm.
becoming an authority on that subject because it had to do with their own personal wound that they
Hmm.
were trying to figure out. And they found some place, and they have to want to share now the knowledge and what they experienced to the rest of the world. There's the sharing and the generosity that we see with Venus and Leo, by the way, because that sign is so dialed in on sharing. When Venus and Leo is connected with their heart and their heart is a flame that way, their warmth radiates,
Yeah.
and they'll bring anyone gets sucked into their radiation in a good way, that love and warmth.
Yeah.
So I'm just to support what you're saying, Stormy. I'm all about it that way.
We're on it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna get to July 22nd, and now we're at 28 degrees of Leo. Venus is, and this is where we will begin this retrograde journey. So I think it's really useful if you've started queuing in June 19th at that 12 degrees, you're taking note as to kind of really what's taking shape for you up into that 28 degrees, because this is what you'll work on in your retrograde path, right? And I
Yeah.
do love that piece of astrology that we really are built to be our best indicators of
Mhm.
what's going on. Like it's been signaled and the tripwire's gone off already if we will actually use the astrology to look at those particular areas. So here we go. Now we will start this review. And I'm like you don't go hide under a rock, because here's the other part, right? If you have Venus retrograde in your chart, everybody else is like running inside to tend to their worth and their value, and you're like called out to demonstrate that you have some. You know what I mean? So it's like everybody else is running in the house and you're running into the streets. Kind of this ideal. I mean, at least that's what I see with my clients who have retrograde Mercury, retrograde Venus, that when that planet goes retrograde, they're out and about. And
Yeah, it's in
it's a
their
demonstration.
yeah, the retrograde, someone born with, let's say they born with Venus retrograde, it's in their DNA. It's
Yeah.
not a foreign land, their inclination, they're there. And so, yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because to cover a lot of the ways this is working, and also, we can learn from the people who have Venus and Leo retrograde. We can learn from them because they've been doing this their whole life. They're doing it every day. So yeah, that's definitely a part of it. I think stationary days like that you're talking about, um, it's definitely something you want to acknowledge. I'm a huge proponent and supporter of ritual, and for me, when we celebrate our birthday every year, let's just say that's a ritual,
Hmm.
right? And we have
Hmm.
our little rituals every day. So I think in important days like this, let's say the beginning of the transit, we talked about June 5th, and here we are today at stations here on the 22nd of July. I'm the type of person who's on my altar is going to petition and make an offering, like, Aphrodite, Greek myth is Venus, like, guide me, show me the way, like show me what the story is in my chart, in the Leo part of my chart. I'm open and I'm ready. I'm receptive, Venus. I'm ready to take in. I'm to incorporate
Mhm.
different value views and systems, possibly different ways of creatively expressing. You don't know maybe at those points exactly what it is. You're going to find that out when we go over these, during the retrograde, when it goes back. That's what we get to play with. But I'm a big pusher of like just acknowledgement. So on a day like that, it's like, okay, here we are, Venus. Show me where to go, and I'm open. So
I'm open. No, I love that. I do love it too, because if you are a person that incorporates ritual and this isn't something that you've done, this is a great time to do that. Or if you've never done that, just in general. And to the other side, if you're just a journaler or you acknowledge or however you do it, no one is exempt from a Venus retrograde. That's what I
yeah.
love. Which to that end, I do ask people during retrograde season to extend a little bit of extra grace to your fellow man, because no one is exempt for it. We're like trying to head forward and we've got these bodies moving forward, but like hearts or values that are moving backwards. There is an ample opportunity to bump into someone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or to, you know, so I do think that retrograde times too are great for upping the grace just a little bit.
Yeah, and let's remember too, I think a key word with Venus in general is desire. And
Mm.
what becomes of desire, and how desire can take hold of oneself and propel one into the world. And so you imagine if you're in desire mode in the sign of Leo, which is magnified and just a raging fire of desire. That's how it rolls with Venus and Leo. Once they're locked in and their heart's locked in, it's like a bonfire. And so
Mhm.
then all of a sudden the bonfire kind of gets stopped. The wind kind of blows the fire down when the station happens, and it kind of maybe quells it. And let's say you were emotionally connected, your everything, let's say your core self was in the bonfire. You're moving through that vessel, and all of a sudden it's like, wait, the party's over, like, or the feeling of like it's just slowing down. That could be actually shocking. That can be disappointing. The feeling of like, I was feeling like, why rain on my parade? Why, I was just a big flame out in my expression and all of you with me. And then there's a disconnect possibly. So that's kind of an odd thing. And it can be for some people. So to go back to what you're saying, Stormy, to be aware of other people around you too, and what they might be going through.
Mhm.
Just,
Yeah.
acknowledging that, so
Yeah, man, you're just making me think about this too, this explosion of Leo desire and how attracting Venus is. I do think now that this would be a phenomenal time where we are learning to purify what we think we want.
Mhm.
Because I don't always just want to be living my best life, right? Sometimes there was a season of Stormy Grace, Nick, where I wanted some romantic cloak and dagger stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was in my desire realm. It didn't appear that way to me, right? But it was like, well, what on the other side of what I'm desiring, who's also impacted in my desire? And is that what I really want? And I got to get clear that that was not really what I wanted.
Yeah.
Right. And to desire something like that is wonderful, but I also got to learn the desire from a wound as opposed to a desire from the heart.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is, because I think when we say the word ego is a good thing.
Yeah.
When it's off balance,
Mhm.
because I think the ego story plays out through the fire signs. It's going to play out through Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Okay, it's how we play this out. But it's like when it gets off kilter, I think that's when sometimes desire can mute or cloud someone,
Yeah.
right? Where it almost becomes too far, where the desire is just purely about oneself. Let's say they were relating with another in a relationship, and it goes beyond the other person and themselves. It turns into something else. It gets to the like a off kiltered ego end. And I think a lot of times with something like Venus and Leo, when it's off kilter and it's not balanced, it becomes overly dramatic. And
Yeah.
and the energy
Yes.
gets put into dramatic scenes that don't have any footing underneath.
Hmm.
They actually don't have the true flame holding it that Venus and Leo truly wants. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is not to, we're not trying to diss on Venus, anybody, Venus, I'm just we're trying to show the other side of things, that why a retrograde happens is to kind of show someone where the certain parts of Venus and Leo are not working the way they could, or they're not working
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a gut check where here's the review period. We start, on the 22nd. So
Right. Like, yeah. If you've ever gotten a like D on a test that you thought you were like kicking butt in that class,
yeah, yeah,
that's like a retrograde. You're
yeah.
like,
Attorney, they just like certain
oh,
reality, like, oof, that was
you're
hard.
like,
Like, yeah, you're
I'm
so elevated in yourself, and all of a sudden, whoop, yeah,
yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. So let's hit some other dates because I do think that as we get to that July 27th marker and we see Venus and Mercury coming together, this is important. This is important with everything that we're talking about because this is information, right?
yeah,
Like it's coming together with Mercury. This is information. So, what is revealed about the worth, the desire, something in the finance, something in the romance? I think that we need this to move functionally through the rest of the retrograde. It's like you get maybe your golden nugget at this time of external information, or you get a piece of information that allows you to make a decision, right? So life is choice, right? What am I choosing here? And it's a big deal, I think. Any thoughts on that?
yeah. I
You
think it
said,
is too, and
yeah.
it goes back to like when we mentioned earlier about the inner planets in the astrology world, because they're very tangible and be able to work with. And then there's the outer body planets, right? So if you're having Mercury, listen, I'm a huge Mercury fan, Hermes fan, because I'm highly charged Mercury person. So I think, yeah, there's the ideas, thoughts, and opinions that we form, right? And then how we communicate those things, that's Hermes, that's Mercury. But
Yeah.
it goes beyond that. I think when we have information exchanges, whether it's with another person, or that exchange is coming in through the world in its ways, it is our way to turn things eventually into physical manifestations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Mercury is the planet that is always bridging like what is outside of us, or the unknown, or the underworld, or our connection to the, however you believe this, the gods and goddesses, whatever out there. And then there's the real world. So it's like what they sometimes they call the golden world, and then the real world. Mercury's the
Mm-hmm.
go-between. So the messages that come through whenever Mercury's involved is to help branch, in a sense,
Right.
divinity into what's real. So what you're saying, then working with the Venus retrograde, Mercury's Venus's pal here, and Mercury is actually holding a mirror up to
That's
Venus.
exactly right, right? Going, girl boss, you have been here before. How
Yeah,
did that go?
yeah,
Right?
yeah. And we know how much Venus likes to look in the mirror. Okay, especially Venus and Leo. So if there's any messages that are going to come through that they'll pay attention to, Mercury's holding the mirror, and then like, check this out. Look at yourself. Look what's coming through me, or through you, through the mirror,
Mm.
reflected back towards you. And so yes, I so tangible and able to be worked with Mercury Venus here. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. What's your next date that you've got?
Yeah, I can't forget this because there's so much that happens with Venus here, because even in July, I forgot to say this, Venus is squares Uranus and Taurus.
Yeah.
And Venus is going to
Yeah.
do this 3 times. It does it again. Venus squares Uranus during when at first in July, the beginning of July, when it's moving forward Venus, but it's in August.
August again. Yeah.
It's in August where while Venus is retrograde, moving back, it makes its second connection to Uranus and Taurus, and here
Mhm.
is a. That's why I think this transit is one of the biggest of the year with Venus, because there's so many players involved in the opera here with Venus. So here comes Uranus, like doing its thing, where it's wanting to uproot and shake up how Venus deals in relationships, Venus and Leo's deals, and brings an
Mm.
erratic energy, electrical energy, but also let's not forget this. It's exciting too, something new.
Yeah.
is coming, wanting to come through with Uranus touching Venus this
Yeah.
way. So that's a date I looked at that was huge. That was in the middle of, or August 9th,
Which is
was
necessary, don't you think? Right? Because I think about my process of change or watching even my fellow man around me change. It's like, okay, cool. I come in and I'm like, yes, right? At an intellectual level, I know I can adjust this desire or I need to adjust this desire. There's something that's not quite right about it, but my heart doesn't know it yet. So getting the head heart connection, sometimes we need the help of Uranus to come and say, hold on, let me flip you for a minute. Now take a look at that. And you're like, oh yeah, that does look good. Kind of still don't buy it though. And then you get like one more pass and Uranus is like, now that you're standing up straight, do you see how that doesn't make any sense? You know, and so then we're able to free and liberate ourselves, I think, from what was limiting before. And it's not always that you need to break up with that person, but if there are relationships that have had cracks in the cement and they are not healing or they're not available for repair, I do think we will be liberated from those things. But old ideas, you know, and some of the old ideas that we have are just stopping us from letting that creative spark live. So I really think that Uranus, the role that it plays here in the innovation, is necessary. Because I do believe that the universe is kind and loving. And so it will give us opportunities to kind of click into different positions and see ourselves through a different lens for a minute and go, oh yeah, now that it's my choice and I have head heart alignment, that doesn't make sense for me anymore. And the benefit to that is that then it fully leaves our vibration, because once I've changed, it's very hard to convince me that something that is not in that forward vibration belongs there anymore. You know,
yeah,
does that make sense?
yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And remember, we got fixed signs involved here, and they're squaring off of each other, right? We talked about this earlier. There's Uranus and Taurus. What rules Taurus? Venus and Leo. So there is some interesting affinity going on here. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard when you have something come out of the blue and rock your world. Let's say rocks Venus and Leo's world, and it's sometimes I always think about Uranus as like there's a tree outside your house and there's a lightning bolt that hits the tree and takes it down, and then you're like, where did that come from? And that just shook everything up, and then it's forever changed, and then you start to figure out it's possibly going to happen again. You just don't know when. So if you have that it kind of, then you embrace that unpredictability. That could be fun, first and foremost, because
Yeah.
anything can happen. And if you can get to a place of understanding what anything can happen is, like catch that wave, as in like sometimes we have a fear of if we're locked into our value systems, let's say, in a certain way, and we don't want that to change,
Yeah.
or something's changing to it, and it's hard to change and fixed signs. But if a fixed sign or Venus and Leo can embrace, like, wait a second, something's shifting here, the ground shaking, what's going to happen? And then you get in the mindset of like, and this is where Mercury can come in too and help. It is just like, well, anything can happen. Then one can think about the good things that could happen. And so, and
Right.
then accepting
Right.
that energy and be like, oh, okay, let's roll with this, bring it on. And, let's say it's between two people who have been together in a while in their relationships. And we know what happens in longer term relationships. Because the honeymoon phase is over and blah, blah. And
Mm-hmm.
we're looking for ways to connect with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can accept the Uranus story coming into Venus here and bringing some spice possibly into your world and different ways to interact and to relate with yourself and the person that you love or people at work or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it might be hard at first, but then to embrace that change, then it becomes something like it's an open world. Like
Right.
anything can go down. And in that sense, I think humans flourish
Yeah.
with healthy mystery, in a place of like what can be. Oh, I accept this energy into my life. Then there's no more resistance. Then
Mm-hmm.
we're back to this core place of Venus in the end, where you're receptive, and then you start attracting something new into your world. And in this case, Uranus is throwing that new into the world. So
Yeah.
um
I
yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
agree more, and I've been married to my husband for like, forever, and it's a delight. And we've been together long term. And the one thing that I think is so sad sometimes when I watch relationships around me, especially in thinking about how Uranus can work here is that it's like sometimes I think love dies and relationships die when they just needed to die off in
Yeah.
that way, and allow for that healthy mystery or that new exploration instead of just the staunch ending of it's not working, let's get away from each other, right? Because the thing is, Venus is a relating planet. So sometimes you're just not relating, but it doesn't mean that it's over. It means adjust, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't
I
know how
think,
many times my husband and I have had to adjust. I'm like, literally, are you speaking Portuguese? What is happening? Because yesterday you spoke English. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? You
yeah,
taking classes or what?
it's real talk. We're talking, you're talking, there's some honesty and brutal honesty in situations of people, let's say in relationships like that, are finding themselves in challenging times to come to a place of like, this is where we are. A lot of times, one or both people are resisting what is because
Mhm.
something has become stagnant and they're resisting it because they identify or they both identify with the vessel that they created from the beginning. And you know,
Yeah,
life has changed.
life
Life has changed.
change.
Sometimes relationships make it or not, but it just, you know, that's how it
Yeah.
works. But I think if one can take the view of like life is not only mysterious, but always provides an answer in the end. And I
Hmm.
think one, if one gets past like what they hold on to in a offset ego way, because it's connected to their sense of identity. If I was supposed to do this in my relationship and have this at this time, and they hold on to
Yeah.
that, that's where things get tough. But if can some create space around themselves, and I think something like, you know, Uranus coming in here too, squaring Venus, like if we think about the lightning bolt comes through, it kind of clears the air and in a
Hmm.
sense creates different space for
Hmm.
something
Yes.
else to manifest itself. And so one has to come to terms with that. How well is one connected to like space changing, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that's 50% of the battle is accepting change. Once someone accepts change, then there's work to be done, but the resistance is gone.
Yeah.
And I,
Absolutely.
yeah, so yeah,
I
we can.
know. Well, but I still got to flash this back because this like, you know, criminal romance stuff is still available, and I'm not here nor there. We're all experiencing life exactly as we need to inside of our lesson base to learn what we need to do, right? But
Yeah.
Uranus does create these interesting opportunities, especially if you're struggling in your, let's say, your relationship dynamic, where all of a sudden such and such shows up. I'm not communicating well with my partner. And then, oh, here's this person that understands, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we get to learn where we are in our character versus our comfort building, or I'm struggling in my finances. And then all of a sudden, here comes this loan opportunity, right? Where are we at in the surprises that also show up? Because just because a surprise shows up at your door doesn't always mean it's a gift, right? So
Yeah.
there is some development of what are my values that you get to form through here. And it's not good or bad, right? It just is going to do it like a Leo, big and loud, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know,
Whatever it is.
yeah, the Venus and Leo, remember when it's off kilter, it can be inflated and what it is and all that. But beyond that, you know, uh, in the end, I think with something like this, with Venus in the sign of Leo, this touches upon what is in every single human, which is the core light. We could call it light or
Yeah.
divinity, whatever your modality is. We
Mhm.
create life there. We create our everything from there, even babies.
Mhm.
Babies, children are an expression of creative life force and what it produces. Okay. Your artwork, your journaling, whatever. Venus moving through Leo is really at the core all about this. Is
Mhm.
touching upon the core sun in oneself, and touching the oneself, and then the vessels of creativity that one uses to output, to show oneself in the world. They're, in a sense, their individuality.
Mhm.
So, you know, this being on the review inherently, it's just remember, people, it's a good thing. And to use the other planets, to find different ways into your core life force. The
Yeah.
thing that Venus and love is constantly around us at all moment in all time. Since the beginning of time to the end of time,
Mm.
it is the secret, unseen web that connects everything and everybody. And it's always there. There's times we're really dialed into it, and there's times where we're disconnected, and we try to find ourselves trying to connect back to it. So Venus retrograde in Leo here, the story is learning that how to reconnect within oneself and one's core self, and inherently from that, we express our core selves in the outside world through love and charm and sensuality and all the good stuff.
All the good stuff. Is that what we're calling all the good stuff?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. What else do we have here? Because we do have Venus will come together with the sun. That's going to be a nice little meetup, actually. I think we're gonna
That's the 13th is when the one of the most important parts in the story that we're talking about is when Venus is conjunct the sun. There's moments they call it Kazemi. There's a story that's happening there. And Venus, basically any planet that goes into the sun is melted down to its purest form. It's a metaphorical death and rebirth cycle that happens. So especially with Venus retrogrades, this is another one of those dates where you want to like acknowledge and be present if you can in whatever way, in the ways that Stormie mentioned earlier, how you journaling or acknowledgement, it's the altar, the petitioning, whatever, it's there. But Venus goes into the sun and meets the sun, and it's in a sense purified. It goes through a purification process. So,
which is beautiful, because like you said, it's just so pure. It's just
and let's just say this quickly. I'm not the full-on expert at this because there's other astrologers who are out there, like Gemini Bread. There's a bunch of people that deal with more the intricate part of the cycle. But we have to remember that Venus plays a story here in the sky where it's evening star from almost 9 months, and then it goes and disappears for almost 2 months technically, but the true disappearing part after that is when Venus does go into the sun. We cannot see it with the naked eye, and it's for a while, it's a couple of weeks at least, until Venus starts to come out of the sun and eventually starts to show itself on the other side as morning star. Like they switch back and forth, and it's a cycle that's been happening since the beginning of time. So whatever the case, that's what happens at this moment here when Venus on the 13th, and I'm going to preach this one more time because I think this is very important. In Greek myth, Aphrodite, Venus in Roman myth, it's actually looked upon in many different ways, not just as one goddess, but also revered in different ways. There's the Venus in the sense of the Aphrodite that deals with like a core base raw desires, right? And what we attract, mundane world, money, resources, love, desire. But there's that other kind of Aphrodite. I think it's called Aphrodite erroneous, they call it. It has to do with the divine love that's kind of above it all, that, like I mentioned earlier, intertwines everything. And so if I were to give a suggestion to people, like they're in the Venus retrograde story, or there's a lot going on and they have some mixed feelings, or they don't know where to go exactly, that one place you can go for sure is to think about divine love itself. And here on the 13th is a moment and a marker of pure divinity in connection with Venus going into the sun. So if I'm going to keep it real simple, for that, and if someone wants to mark it down their calendar, or they're listening to this later on, that's a day to put your heart and everything and stand in that divine love and that rebirth that happens there. It's our core right as human beings. That's where we come from. That divinity core life force place. I'm just a proponent of it, and I've seen so many changes happen with clients and people who have had their own kind of dance they do with this, right? So that's why I wanted to say it.
Absolutely. It makes me think of the Brene Brown book, The Perfection of Imperfection, right? That you are exactly perfect as in what you are. But do you know that? Right? Yeah.
Hey, she doesn't mess around.
I know she sure doesn't.
You don't mess
Get her on the podcast and be like, we didn't say anything for an hour. We just let her be. You know what I mean? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, sweet.
All right. So then we're going to get to September 3rd. We're back to this 12-degree space, and Venus is coming direct. So we've got a little bit of a view on where we've been since June 19th, since 2014, 2015. Right. And that's the part, though. I feel like here, when a planet comes direct, it's like they just came back to the house from vacation, like in pre-retrograde, they got to pack, get all the stuff together, make the plans. Retrograde, we go on the vacation, but they just came back to the house. So as with every planet, I think before you're wanting to know what wisdom Venus has dropped and bestowed on you, like give her a chance to have her cosmic coffee and like chill out for a minute. Don't make any requests for 2 to 4 days. Like just be in the post stationing energy and sense, where are you in your center? Where are you in what you've been learning in that time? Where are you in relation to that 2014, 2015 story, so that you can breathe it in? Because the thing I never want for people to do is to miss the assimilation and miss bringing the story into the body, because it's great to sit and talk. But when we intellectualize the astrology, as opposed to bring it down into the body, into that experience, to see what it has seeped through us, or seeped into us, we really miss out. And this is a great way to inform the story. So be with it for a couple days, I think, post, Venus coming direct, and see what you've gathered. Now, I still don't think that the full story until we get into October and it leaves that post-retrograde shadow time, gets back up there to that 28 degrees and is heading out. But what a wonderful time to be. Hell, just celebrate you made it through another Venus retrograde, have a little bath, I'm a Taurus, right? So I'm
You
like,
just said something I was going to bring up as a metaphor. Was a bath. So for people watching and listening, when you let's say you were lucky, you went to a retreat center, or you went to go get a massage, or you sat in a sauna, or you did something, you just took a bath, like you're talking about, the feeling that you have, like you just shed like your skin, like you just, and you're kind of like that relaxed, buzzy kind of thing, that feeling. If we talk about here on the Venus going through a metamorphosis and changing and rebirth process and slowly coming out of that, Venus doesn't want to move fast, okay, here in this moment. It just went through a retrograde and it's stopping. So that feeling of coming out of the sauna or the retreat center, you do want to sit with that and assimilate it. Think about like, oh, I just got a massage, and you're running out to the next errand. Optimally, you want to enjoy the massage, not just while you had it, but like for the next period of time, to let things sink in. And I really like what you said, Stormie, because it goes down back to the core thing we talked about in the beginning, is listening and living through our senses. And this is Venus in the end, whatever sign that it's in, but in this case, definitely through Leo. I think one could in this moment not just assimilate things, but also like get to a place of just like, oh, I am beautiful.
Yeah.
I am worth it all. Yeah. And in one way, I don't need the world or someone else to tell me this. I just need to tell me this. And not only am I saying it to myself, I'm feeling it too. Like I feel it in my body, and I accept myself. I accept everything about myself, and even the things that I thought that used to work and weren't working and functioning anymore, that it would bother me or mess with my head, I let that go. That the imperfections, this is go back to what you said with Brene Brown, that the imperfect is perfect.
Yeah.
So the acceptance, and that's part of assimilating. That's part of acceptance, and inherently that place of being in that motion is connected to divine love and to divine everything.
I gotta jump here though too a little, because Venus is so relational, that we got to also be able to extend that to another person. One of the things that my mother taught me, and my spiritual teacher reinforces this all of the time, is that when I decided to get married, she was like, here's the deal. You accept that man from the top of his head to the bottom of his toes, no changes needed, or you leave him alone. And that is a very tall order, because what it does is put me in a position to, with everything that he is going through, with everything that my children are going through on their own personal journeys, to stop and accept them as perfect first, and then look for the position of guidance should I have one. And it calls to me, to Venus and Leo, be honest about my role, be honest about when my expression is needed, be honest if this is about they need to change or I need to change, right? Which is, to be clear, most of the time it is like my wet dream that other people will change so I don't have to, but that's not the way what life works.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's actually about me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think of, if you understand what I just said there, then you get it. But, I think that's a big deal too. We're on the journey of learning not just that love and acceptance, also being able to pull that out and come to the people around us and be like, no, you are perfect, right? It's not just like I'm over here under the museum lights like a work of art and my husband is some like scaffolding project that they're never going to finish, because like,
Yeah.
what is that? It cannot just be your partners always need work. It cannot be that every person you've ever been with is a narcissist. Like, how did that happen? Right? These
Yeah.
kinds of things where it is like, well, now hold on a minute. It's not that the financial system is totally corrupt, it's that you don't budget, right? What are some of these things where we have to also look without instead of just within and go, whoa, that is perfect as it is, and I got to adjust.
Yeah, and you're talking also too, going back to values, because in a sense too, what is around you is reflective of what you value. A lot of times we work, we get a paycheck, we take the paycheck, we pay the rent or the mortgage, and we buy other things around the house. And those things that we acquire buy, they're reflective of who we are, of our hard work. And that's the typical easy, like the money part of it. To go back to something you're talking about, like your husband, like, I can't just stand here. We remember when Venus and Leo is dialed in and doing what she does best, is not just about themselves. It starts there, but it's not. They're bringing in and they're uplifting the others around them that they care about. That's where we see what we always hear about with generosity with the sign of Leo. They're not just like, it's not just look at me all, they get a bad rap for that. But if anybody knows that's been involved with Leo energy when it's flowing, they're when you're off kilter, the Leo will come in your life and give you the best pep talk in the world, and show, reflect courage. They'll show you how courageous you are. They'll remind you of how good pride is too, to have pride in oneself. So the generosity shows itself in many different ways with Venus and Leo, with the ones they care about, the one they're connected to. And not only that, they're all the way loyal to the end when they're connected. And so that's a good thing too, to go back to like what you're talking about, Stormie, about here the warmth is shared and given and celebrated with other people. So yeah, I'm so glad that you said that. And I think too, another interesting word to remember too is nobility, and not to think about just like kings and queens, but like what that means to be noble too in actions.
That's a great question, right? Yeah. Like I think you guys, let's answer that actually in the chat, like without grabbing the Webster's, off cuff. What does that word mean? Like, I would love to know what people are thinking about that. I would love to know. And we can check back. We can check the comments and see what people have to say about that. Because what a word. Gosh, that is good. I mean, we're not usually throwing that around.
No, we're not. And it's even turned into, I think, a kind of has a bad rap because of what it's attached to, per se, with maybe monarchies and stuff like that. Right. But we gotta get past that, because to stand for something, to have pride in something, and then to our actions that we take, our creative actions with ourselves and others, that it has a sense of something to it, life, pride and being proud of where one comes from, of what one has done with themselves, and that's the other thing we see with Leo, is like, look what I made, look what I created. There's an excitement, an inherent thing. It's not like, sometimes it turns into the off balancing, like I need all the attention in the world. But it's not about that. It's more that the initial core energy is like, look what I made. I want to share it with you. See,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. And I don't want to keep it for myself. I want to share it with you too. Like, see, and then it's reciprocal. Then the other person's on the other side when they're dialed in, it's like, look what I made. And then you're just high on life, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
then sometimes kisses come out of that. That's awesome.
That, you know what I mean? Yeah, a heart overflowing with gratitude is very
Yeah.
hard to contain. So as we're going to end this transit though, kind of for me where we have it in the beginning of the talk is looking at Venus again, having this trine now retrograde with Chiron. And this is where I feel like in that 2014-15 story, like there's a healing that's available here. And it's a lot of what you said, acceptance, where it was like at that time of my life, even if it wasn't negative, even if it was just, I didn't express myself the way that I could today. Cause I'm going to tell you what, listen, 2014, Stormy, I expressed myself the best that I could at that time. It was very true. And it was as true as I could be, as opposed to 2013 expression of Stormy. It's very different. It's very
Mm.
different, right? I've been two different women in this one span of time. So it's like I look forward to seeing for all of us, like, where do you have that healing? Whereas, like, yeah, I just did the best that I could at that time. And now I'm available for a different level of expression. And my gosh, I have to share this with you, maybe from a male perspective, you can
Mhm.
laugh, but I was in the gym. And it's so funny. My husband was there too. And there's a group of young women, and they were probably 20, 24, right in that age range. And first of all, whenever I see groups of younger women now, it does make me reflect. I'm like, what was I like? What were my characteristics? What was my mind frame? These kinds of things. And my husband walks in and they just giggled. Oh my God, they just giggled their little eyeballs off and the little eyelashes were going. And I was charmed. Listen, I got Venus in Aries, so I was like, oh great, people want him. Now I want him. Like it's weird. But
Yeah.
and he's got Venus in Pisces, so he was like, oh my God, don't look at me. So anyway, and I was like, gosh, I just remember that, how whether I liked you or I didn't like you, just I was loaded with youth and vitality and hormones, and oh my God, there's a male energy somewhere present. And the interesting part was, to the other side of the gym, there were a group of guys and they're working out and they're doing the stuff, and I thought to myself, gosh, here I am now at 40, and I don't want anything out of that corner. I'm good. I'm just here to do the treadmill. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And this, like, I'm like, wow, at a core level, the body I came in here with that has had children, that has done these things, that has gained weight, has lost weight. And today I just want to get on the treadmill. Right. And that comes from just such a different place of my value and my acceptance of myself, but also an embracing of like, hold on, I've been that giggly girl over there too.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a story of like, yeah, and one has values, systems, and what they want to desire in certain points in their life, and they go through life and have experience and like, oh, I thought that's what I wanted or whatever, but then yeah, we change, we get older, we get smarter, I think, and or I think we just get more dialed into
Yeah.
what is of worth to us, what it really is, and we're coming into this world as soon as we come out of the womb, our family, our community, the world is saying, hey, this is what you should do and be.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think we spend a lot of our time, whether we're choosing to or not. Everyone's different. People are different with this. They rebel towards that earlier in their life, or isn't until later. It just, well, however someone's timeline goes with their value systems, it always changes in life experience. And you get to these places of these realizations, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just laughing at the scenario you have there because you're going to the past and you're like, I remember, remember this, or that used to be a story, or that's something I used to do. And I think whether you're talking about retrograde that happened back then for 2014, we're talking about or we're talking about the one now with Venus, and anything like Venus retrograde, these are the types of things that happen, or the knowledge that ends up coming through. It is, you kind of see what it works for you and what is of worth and priority to for oneself, right? I also want to say, I don't want to forget something here. For those who are Leos, you have like a Leo rising, planets in Leo, Venus in Leo. or anyone else wants to take something from this, this is from just a pure vanity perspective. This is like a makeover that's happening
Yeah.
here with this too. So we're talking about basically makeovers that are happening with our value systems and our priority systems, but this actually could be so simple too. It's like you get something new for your wardrobe. It's been a while since you saw the person you like that deals with your hair or your nails. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
those are also representative of the beautification of oneself and like valuing oneself. We do it in
Yeah.
many different ways, right?
Yeah.
So definitely with Venus and Leo, this is the star actress backstage that just got off the stage, and then they're backstage and then like, oh, it just didn't work. They didn't applaud or something. And then, but whatever. And then they get back to the creative process. And then there's, wait, I'm going to, try a new persona, like a new look,
Right.
and then they, get their hair done, or they get just one subtle piece of clothing or something, piece of jewelry. I don't know, but I just want to say that this is actually part of and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a thing of like, look how hot I am, like,
Yes.
acceptance of like, and showing like, I'm just bright, like, I'm looking good.
Yeah.
And not like you look good, you feel good. And it's
Right.
an inherent in us to want to feel good. We deserve that. So
Yeah.
I just want to say that here. Like Venus and Leo shows us that. They show us how to do this.
Yeah.
It just happens that they're going through the process themselves with the retrograde. They're having to redo themselves, or
The
basically
rebranding.
yeah, actually, that's huge what you said, rebranding, because I think that's a big part of it in our culture and society.
Hmm.
And if we're talking on a mundane level with social media and what's happening with apps and how we're interconnected and how we express ourselves through our page, through our, and if at the core part of our world right now,
Yep.
Twitter isn't functioning like it used to. Things are changing with Instagram. People are looking for something new social media wise to
Mhm.
express and show themselves. This goes back, Stormy, to what you talked about earlier with Pluto, the bigger picture of things and how we're integrating with each other in society. There is a reforming, there is a rebranding going on.
Thousand
And
percent.
I'm really curious to see how it plays out. So
Right. Well, and it's we got to stay here for a second now because I think this is fascinating
yeah.
because we look at this in the United States chart, and the United States is under a huge rebranding, especially in terms of our currency,
Mhm.
right? Like we've been the reserve currency for a while, and now there are some countries who are like, maybe not. So it's like,
Yeah.
hold on, right? So it's really when we take it out of just that personal context and put it now into that mundane area, it is fascinating to look at, exactly like you said, like a whole country, a whole globe rebranding that is kind of
Mhm.
happening out there, and people, how many more digital nomads we have that are leaving countries to go other places where
Yep.
countries are having to get it together, right? Like, and I don't think that I ever really thought about this, but Andrew Henderson said, and I love this man's teaching, but he said, your country should actually be vying for you. And I was like,
Huh.
what? Like I had never considered that. And I feel like the globe is on notice with Venus in retrograde in Leo.
Yeah, I remember how we started talking here with right off the bat. There was, Venus enters Leo at 0 degrees, and then Pluto's there at 0 degrees, Aquarius. Pluto's going to do this dance over the 0 degree place from now when we're recording this, which is in April of 2023, all the way to the end of 2024. Is really the dance that Pluto does at this thing. So if we're talking mundane level, and then we have an inner body planet like Venus and Leo do its retrograde thing. This is a huge deal. That it
Huge.
actually puts things out on the table of transition and the rebranding that you're talking about. Rebranding of oneself, rebranding of one's connection to community, to their nation, to the world, how people are looking at each other. Now the U.S. is under question about they used to be the person or the country that did this and did that and represented these dreams or certain things, but it's not
Mhm.
working the way it is anymore. That dreams, there's certain realities coming into play. It was just last week that Colombia has revamped their visa opportunities. They want people to come there. See, they're vying for
Yep.
people outside the country to come in to give them these digital visas for nomads. Greece is doing this.
I'm
Southeast
on
Asia
my
is
way to
doing this.
Spain. You know that. We're headed to
Yeah,
Spain.
Portugal. Portugal. Yeah. So and that is inherently intertwined with commerce and money. Come
Absolutely.
here, you can make money here, and they want people to spend their money there. It's just, it's kind of reciprocal. Tourism, and they're spending the money there at the same time because of an internet connection. You could do it from wherever. That's one story, how what is changing
Yeah.
with resources and money and so on and so forth, and in its connection with technology.
And we
So
haven't even gotten into medical tourism. I,
no, I
oh my
yeah, you're
God,
absolutely right. Yeah, yeah, yep.
6 more podcasts. We just need 6 more podcasts,
Actually, that's
Nick,
a
and we can
huge
knock
one.
it
Like,
out. Right? That would be
yeah,
really good. We should come back with
yeah,
like bringing up SJ's mundane and really do that talk, because I think that we can really watch this play out astrologically, just the retrograde period alone.
yeah, definitely. I think and again, something Venus and Leo and its connection to this is where we can really see it play out, and have it be something tangible. Even as astrologers out there, you're looking at charts or certain celebrity or certain country's chart, to see it play out. But yeah, I hope inherently, because in the end, I'm partly a Saturn person. I get cynical, I need my boundaries and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't mean I don't have visions and hope has died. And as a
Sure.
matter of fact, I think in the end, whether it's in one's personal life or in the mundane level, something like Venus and Leo, in the end, if you think about creativity and life force, it always is branched in hope and
Mm-hmm.
feel good. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
starts there at least. And so, I don't give up on that. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
anyone. And for people out there who might or don't see it, maybe there is Venus retrograde in the summertime here in Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, it's fall, that if it's affecting your chart in your world and you kind of like something has lost its luster, or you don't feel connected, remember, move through your senses. You can find hope and aspiration
Yeah.
through Venus. Remember, when we look at Venus in the glyph, it's like a cross and the circle on the top. The circle on the top is a circle, the never-ending circle, the Ouroboros of life. And the cross is spirit and matter coming together. As a matter of fact, the cross is the angles of the chart.
Yeah.
Think about it, right? So, but in the end, if we think about this, in the end, the retrograde really is about coming back to spirit and being reborn in what spirit is. And then when we come out into the world, we are putting that and making it into
Mm-hmm.
matter. So you could find hope there in spirit, and that hope can turn into something tangible and real in your life. And that's the matter part of it. And that's the beauty of Venus. It's always doing that, and it's always there, and it's always mathematically even on point. And it's in everything that you see: the flowers, the trees, the burning of frankincense, the music that you hear, things that you touch,
Mm-hmm.
on your body, your clothes, everything. It's all there. It's always there. So if you're looking for that hope and in the inspiration, sometimes we're always looking for the dramatic story. Sometimes it's so simple,
Mm-hmm.
so simple as that cup of coffee you have in the morning and how it smells so good. And there you could find hope and inspiration. So
Yeah, no, I love that. I love
yeah.
that a ton. Find the universe in the eyes of the person you're talking to.
Yep. Ah,
Me,
Stormy, that's good. I'm feeling good.
me too. Like, yeah, but listen, our charts are not, they're pretty complementary. So I feel like we tend to do and have good chats together.
Yeah. Yeah, for those who don't know, this time Stormy and I have talked like at conferences and stuff, and then it's like 4 hours later or something.
I know.
Uh,
I
yeah,
know. And I feel like I was having a reflection of this, and then we'll close with this, but I was having this reflection on like the first time I met you offline, and that I feel like I started at chapter 8. I'm like, so anyway, back to what you were saying, and you're like, we,
yeah,
I'm like
it's
sometimes unreasonably deep where I meet people at Jupiter and Scorpio, and it's like, oh, maybe, maybe Mercury, Gemini in them, a little bit.
yeah. Yeah. There's always been that way, Stormy, when we've connected, and even when I didn't know you, like I would see you on YouTube or whatever, and your energy, like, and your uniqueness coming through, and the way you're connecting and relating, since this is a Venus, recording. And again, the way you're relating, and yes, it's true, everyone. She started talking in the podcast about the things that she wears in the Venus and Aries. It's all true. She backs it up. It's all true. So I don't quite know for sure 100% if I'm going to be at the NORWAC conference. It's looking that way to be there, and I know you're going to be there, but if that's the case, it'll be great to see and talk with you in person. So
yeah, and you guys too, if you're going to be there, whether it's on Zoom or whether you're coming in person or whatever, or just as we're here online, pop over to Nick's channel. He is always doing stuff, got just beautiful reports. You're doing gorgeous astrology over there. So thank you for holding your side down. But pop by and see us, say hi. Like, we're really not inaccessible people. That's
yeah,
what kind
the
of love about.
conferences, yeah, Norwalk's like that. It's always had that where I, even when I went and I went, oh my God, look who's over there. Like, that's the person's book I was reading and it's changed my life. And over the years, next thing I talk to him, next thing I'm having a beer with him.
Right?
Or just saying hello. It doesn't have to be that, but that's something about that conference has always had that vibe of just, we're all humans, we're all just trying to do it and figure it out, and we all have our story. And thank you, by the way, for mentioning my world. Like at my YouTube channel, Sparkles of Gold. I'm on sparklesofgold.com. You could find me on Instagram and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, come chase us around the internet. All right, you guys, grab your charts, check out your Venus energy, spend some time, re-listen to this, go back in it, see where you're at with things. I will make sure that the Venus retrograde dates are in the description box down below, so you have a quick access to that. Enjoy your retrograde period. Look forward to seeing you through it, in it, on the other side of it, and finding out how we've changed and developed. Thank you again, Nicholas, for coming by, and we'll see you over on your channel sometime.
Yeah, thank you, Stormy. Thank you. Thank you for all of this, and keep doing you. Yeah.
Seems like that's the instructions of Venus retrograde.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Yeah, that's a good way to end.
All right, bye, you guys.